Hey there, I'm Alex Kidman, and this is the PowerA OPS V1 controller. And technically speaking, so is this, although this is the PowerA OPS V3 Pro controller. Let's get into the review. So PowerA sent me all three controllers to review, and while the V1 controllers are more on your affordable side, as a product with the Pro suffix might suggest, the V3 Pro is more pitched at the Pro crowd, although still at a more affordable PowerA-esque price, really. They're PC and cloud gaming controllers that are also Android compatible, and the short form of it is, they're fairly reasonable. There's a couple of nice features here, a couple of things that could work a little bit better. Let's get into it, first of all, by talking about the design. So all three controllers share what I'll call the Xbox design, because they look like an Xbox controller. I mean, you've got your classic X, Y, A, B button configuration, dual sticks, and a D-pad to play with, plus triggers and shoulder buttons galore. They've all got the same kind of layout, no matter which of the controllers you're talking about. The PowerA OPS V1 is very much the basic model of the set, so it's got basically fairly smooth grips here, very standard at the front button layout. And then at the back, you have 4 programmable buttons, plus selections for how long you want the triggers at the back to go back, as well as your connection mode. Now, the rear customizable buttons, they're okay if you like that kind of thing. Obviously, it depends on what kind of gamer you are as to whether or not they're reasonably well placed. But I do have a problem with these switches. And the problem, and the camera is just never, ever going to pick this up, the problem is that all the labeling on all of them is in black on black. And it's tiny, tiny font too. It actually makes it really hard to see. Now, for these selectors for how far you want the triggers to travel, that's not so bad because obviously you can just feel how they're traveling. But for the selection switch down here, that's a much bigger problem because it genuinely is really, really hard to read. And yeah, I know, I'm an old guy, and you might think, well, Alex, you've just got really, really awful eyesight. So I tested this with an 18-year-old, and he took a look and went, yeah, that's really bad. It's really hard to see. So it's not just me. There's something where just a tiny little bit of colored paint would have made a huge design difference. And then if you want to talk eye-catching designs, there's the Fortnite variant of the OPS V1. And this is the same controller, but with a Fortnite lick of paint and an exclusive Fortnite item. And look, I've got to be honest, Fortnite ain't my thing, so I can't really talk about whether or not the glider that you get the code for in the box is worth it or not. I genuinely don't know. If you do, please comment below as to whether or not it's a rare and exclusive thing or common as dirt. Genuinely, I would not know. This certainly stands out in a way. White controllers, in my experience, tend to look a little bit grubbier, a little bit faster, and in fact, all of these controllers have picked up a little bit of grub while I've been testing them. And you might think, well, great. At least with the white controller, when you flip it around, you're going to be able to see those labels you were complaining about. But nope, exactly the same thing, but in white. I really don't know what they were thinking there. And again, it's not a huge problem. A lot of people might just go, well, I'll just have it in one of its connection modes all of the time and never need fuss with it. And that's cool too, but they could have made this clearer. Then there's the big puppy of the set. This is the OPS V3 Pro. Significantly more expensive as a controller, also a fair bit heavier in the hand. You also get slightly more textured grips at the base here. And as you can see, RGB lighting, although I'm not a big fan of RGB lighting. But you can, thankfully, very easily and very quickly switch it off, which I prefer. The other big point of difference here is that around the back, you not only have that set of 4 customizable buttons, you've also got some customizable buttons up the top here, which are, frankly, the easiest ones to reach. I'm not sure too many people need 6 customizable buttons. I mean, how many fingers do you people have that this is a necessary thing? But I suppose more might be better if they're more reachable for you, or you've got specific functions in mind that suit your particular gameplay style. The V1 and V1 Fortnite controllers also come with these little analog caps that you can pop onto the controllers to make them taller if you like that kind of feel. I've got to say, I'm not a big fan of that approach. I do appreciate the fact that they're at least color matched to the Fortnite one and in black for the regular V1 controller. You also get a reasonably long USB-C to USB-A cable for charging, as well as a small black USB receiver for its 2.4 gigahertz connection mode. My one design complaint here is that for the V1 controllers, there's absolutely nowhere to store that receiver, which is a bit of a problem. If you ever had one of those ones, because they're very similar to the ones that you get with keyboards and mice, go missing, you can see where the problems might arise here. Of course, if you're only ever going to plug this into one desktop PC that lives in your study, then maybe it'll be perfectly fine. But I could have wished for just like a little recessed hole somewhere in here where I could store that receiver when not in use, because I might be using it as a Bluetooth controller, I might be using it plugged in. As it stands, you'll have to find somewhere safe to keep it when not in use. Now, this isn't an issue for the V3 Pro because it comes with this charging dock. And the charging dock, as you can see just here, has a little spot for the USB receiver to go. Nice little design touch. I mean, simple enough. This is not the best charging dock, I've got to say. Actually, fitting it and getting it on in place is all right, as you can see there. But the issue that I've had with it is that it doesn't actually fit all that well. It's not as natural as, for example, the 8-bit Do controller that I recently reviewed, which has a much more solid base to drop onto. This is a bit simpler, but it functions. It gets the job done. And of course, you don't have to have that. You can directly plug through for charging if you wish. With the V3 Pro, you don't get the little analog thumbstick caps, but that's because these use a really neat little twisting mechanism to adjust the height of each of the sticks. It's a great move for those who might have different sized hands, or if this is a shared controller and you need to adjust that height, or if you just find the regular height to be uncomfortable. I've not found that to be a huge problem, but I appreciate the flexibility of being able to adjust that stick height and how it might affect certain gameplay styles. It's nice to see. One of the biggest selling points for the OPS controllers is that they all feature Hall effect sticks and triggers. So that should hopefully help minimize stick drift over time. That's the whole point of a Hall effect stick. And so far, so good for the sticks, although I did hit one kind of interesting, quirky problem with the triggers. And surprisingly, this was for the triggers on the V3 Pro model. So I play an awful lot of the Earth Defense Force games. I've been playing a lot of Earth Defense Force 6 of late, especially as it's now available on Steam in English. And look, that's not a game without its flaws and oddities. But one of the odder things that I noticed was that the right trigger when I was playing the game, if I got into a vehicle, I couldn't fire the weapons with the right trigger. Could do it on foot. It was working as the right trigger there, but not in vehicle. And I thought, oh, is this the game having a problem? But other games didn't seem to have that issue. And what I ended up doing to fix the issue was to use PowerA's PCHQ software. So this is PowerA's calibration software, which also lets you do things like set the RGB lighting, custom setups, and the usual kind of stuff that you get with a lot of this controller calibration software. And they do note that it's in beta, so I suppose I have to give it a little bit of a soft tread on that basis. But I still wish it was a little bit better in beta than this. It's crashed on me a couple of times. Working out exactly how to get it and how to install it was a little bit of a chore. And oddly, during my review period, it wanted an update. Now that's fine, I don't mind updating software, but as soon as I said yes, download, it just took me to the main PowerA webpage. It didn't actually take me to a support site or take me somewhere where I could easily download the software. I then had to click through to find it. And I think in this day and age, you can just do a bit better than that. Still, overall, these are really pleasant controllers to use. I do especially like the Pro controller, just because it's a bit weightier. Those grips feel a little bit nicer in the hand. Response across the board has been very, very good with both the sticks and the D-pad. With the D-pad, I suppose the one thing I would say is that you do have to be happy with that slightly concave style of D-pad if you prefer a more traditional flat Nintendo style D-pad. That's not what this has, but otherwise few problems with that. I haven't used the programmable buttons a great deal because, again, they're not to my taste, but I would say the upper buttons are much easier to reach than those lower down ones are. Again, your mileage and needs may vary. In terms of connectivity, what you're talking here is either direct USB connection, which is fine, but I don't know why you'd buy a wireless controller not to use it wirelessly, or Bluetooth, or optimally 2.4 gigahertz via the included receiver. Now, Bluetooth does work, and it does work for more than just PC, although I should say I've not been able to get any of these to pair successfully with an iOS device. Android will work, it will pair. The one thing with Android and game controllers, and you're probably aware of this if you're an Android gamer, is that some games will play nicely and others will not, and it can be a bit hit and miss, and sometimes you've got to do configuration running around, but it certainly has worked for me on select Android games. There is that capability on board. Most of my testing, I should say, has been done with the 2.4 gig receiver because I like having the optimal wireless connection if I can get it. In terms of power, the V1 models only have 550 mAh batteries, which is probably why they do feel a fair bit lighter than the Pro model, which has a 1200 mAh battery. Now, for the V1 models, PowerA reckons you can get about 20 hours of gameplay, and you might think, well, that means the Pro must have like nearly 40. It's actually only 30, but I'm guessing that's going to be their estimate based on the idea that you'll have the RGB lighting going all the time because, of course, that is going to use power. That power ain't for free, folks. And look, the reality here is no, I'm not doing any 20 or 30-hour gaming sessions because that's not a healthy thing to do. But over a number of weeks of testing, yeah, they'll hit near those levels fairly reliably without too much stress. And of course, I think the key appeal for these are going to be as PC gamepads, and I suspect in a lot of cases, people are going to be awfully near a USB power source, if it's not in fact just your PC, so recharging them is also fairly simple, fairly stress-free. So should you consider the PowerA OPS V1 and V3 Pro controllers? Well, look, they're not quite as fancy as your full-fat, really expensive gaming controllers because, of course, they're not. You're getting what you pay for. But what you're getting here is reasonably decent. Like, they're solid controllers. They're well within their value range for what they cost here in Australia. And as such, yeah, they're a good option if you need a new PC games controller. You do need to recognise the limitations, and I could wish that the PowerA PC software was a little less crash-prone and a little easier to configure. But beyond that, there's a lot to like here. And that's my take on the PowerA OPS V1 and V3 Pro controllers. What do you think? Got any thoughts? Hit me up in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching all the way through to the end, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Thank you.